In the quiet of the night, the city whispers its secrets, and some are deadly. NNFOG rolled through the narrow streets of Baltimore, curling around the brick walls and flickering street lamps. Detective Margaret Maggie Callahan tightened her coat against the chill, her boots echoing on wet cobblestones. The call had come just past midnight. A body found in an alley behind a shuttered deli. An SHE paused at the yellow tape fluttering in the wind. Officers murmured among themselves, their flashlights cutting swaths through the mist. She knelt by the corpse, a man in his 40s, suited, face bruised, neck twisted at an unnatural angle. Maggie's stomach churned. "Who would do this in plain sight?" she muttered. Officer Diaz shook his head. "Witnesses say they heard a scream, then silence. No one saw the attacker. Nothing stolen. Just left him there." Maggie's eyes scanned the alley. Graffiti scrawled in crimson and black, bottles broken on the wet pavement, shadows stretching like fingers from the walls. Something about the scene felt personal. "Run a check on him," Maggie said, standing. Her voice was calm, but inside, a spark of unease burned. "I want everything. Records, associates, anything that can tell me why someone would want him dead." As the team worked, Maggie noticed a single detail, a playing card, the queen of spades, tucked under the man's collar. She bent down, lifting it gently. Its edges were smudged with dirt, but the inked design was unmistakable. "And this isn't random," she whispered. "Someone wants a message delivered." Across the alley, a figure watched from the shadows. Thin, hunched, and careful, the stranger held a cigarette, the ember glowing faintly. As Maggie's team worked, the figure vanished into the fog, leaving no trace but the sense of being hunted. Maggie's phone buzzed. A text with no number and "Stop asking questions, detective, or the next card will be yours." Some warnings are more than threats. They are invitations to a deadly game. Maggie stared at her phone, the text glowing in the darkened squad room. Her stomach knotted. She had faced threats before, but never so direct, so calculated. An Officer Diaz leaned over her shoulder. "Any idea who it's from?" Maggie shook her head. "Not yet, but leaving a card, that's old school. Professional, personal." An SHE spread out the victim's file on the table. His name was Robert Holloway, mid-40s. Small-time investment broker, with connections that hinted at more than finance. Not enough to explain murder in a back alley. Then Maggie noticed something. On his desk at home, according to a neighbor, a single chess piece, a black queen, was missing. Combined with the playing card, the symbolism was chilling. Diaz frowned. "So this is some game? Who's the player?" Maggie's eyes narrowed. "Someone who wants us to know it's a game. Someone who knows Robert knows me. Maybe even knows the police. Whoever it is, they're confident. Too confident." NNSHE called for the forensics team. "Check the alley again, every scrap of evidence. I want prints, fibers, everything. And go through surveillance footage from the surrounding buildings. Someone saw him last alive." As the team got to work, Maggie's mind raced. Who had Robert crossed? And why leave such a clear signature? NNTHE answer came sooner than expected. Surveillance showed a man trailing Robert through the streets that night. Dark coat, fedora pulled low. He paused whenever Robert looked back. Then, in the alley, the man ducked behind a dumpster. When the attack happened, the camera shook as if someone shoved it, and when it steadied, the figure had vanished. Maggie muttered, "Like a ghost." And Diaz frowned. "And you think that's all connected to the card?" Maggie nodded. "The queen of spades is a symbol. Death, betrayal, the end of a line. Whoever sent it wants to make a statement. And it's not finished." And hours later, Maggie returned to her apartment. The fog outside had thickened, curling against the windows like the hands of the dead. She set her keys on the table and froze. A single envelope lay there, unmarked, and NHER fingers trembled as she opened it. Inside was another card, the King of Hearts. Beneath it, a note N, "Heard you were curious. Curiosity kills the cautious. Choose wisely." Maggie's pulse raced. This was no random threat. Someone was orchestrating a game, pulling pieces into the shadows. And now she was a player N. Across the city, in a dimly lit apartment, a man smiled at his wall of photographs. One photo showed Maggie, taken through the rain-streaked window of her office. Underneath, in red ink, "She's next." When the city hides secrets, the fog becomes a cover for danger, and no one is safe. Detective Maggie Callahan couldn't sleep. The envelope lay on her kitchen table, the King of Hearts staring back at her like a challenge. She poured herself black coffee, hands trembling slightly, mind racing through every angle. Officer Diaz had already called her earlier, worried. "You okay, detective?" he had asked. She'd lied, saying she was fine. But deep down, she knew this wasn't a simple threat. It was a promise. NNBY dawn, she was on the streets, retracing Robert Holloway's last steps. Fog clung to the buildings, muffling footsteps, masking faces. Every shadow looked like it might move. Every flicker of light seemed like a signal. NNSHE passed the alley again, now cordoned off, and noted the remnants of forensic markers. Her eyes fell on a dark shape behind a dumpster. Heart racing, she approached cautiously, only to find it was a discarded briefcase, damp with dew. She opened it, revealing papers scattered across the wet pavement. Financial ledgers, transaction slips, and notes in a handwriting she didn't recognize. Diaz arrived, panting. "Detective, you shouldn't be here alone. This guy, he's smart, he's watching everything." Maggie didn't answer. She bent over the papers, reading quickly. Among the mundane figures, she found a name repeated: Elias Monroe. Each entry was cryptic, referencing meetings, transfers, and debts owed. Maggie's brow furrowed. Monroe wasn't just a name. He was a ghost in the city's underworld. Rumors suggested he ran an intricate web of illegal deals, but no one had solid proof until now. "N. Monroe," she whispered. "So Robert crossed him, or worked for him. Either way, it's dangerous." Diaz glanced around nervously. "You think he left these on purpose?" Maggie nodded slowly. "Yes. And if he's sending cards to warn or taunt, this isn't just about Robert. He wants me involved. This is personal." NNSHE stuffed the papers in her bag and turned to leave. A movement in the fog caught her eye. A man, standing a block away, watching her. His features were obscured, but the posture was deliberate, patient. She froze. NNTHE figure stepped back, melting into the mist. A chill ran down her spine. She could almost hear his whisper through the fog. "Your turn, detective?" And back at headquarters, Maggie spread the papers across her desk. Every number, every name, every meeting. She needed to map it all. Monroe's network was vast, sprawling, and lethal. The question wasn't if he'd come after her, but when NNHER phone buzzed. Another text. This one was different. A single image. A photo of Maggie leaving the alley, time-stamped, taken from a shadowed vantage point. NNTHE message read, "Every move is seen. Every step counts. Fail, and the queen falls." Maggie's jaw tightened. The game had escalated. Robert was dead, and now she was the target. Every instinct screamed at her to pull back, to disappear. But Maggie had never been one to run. In a dark corner of the city, Elias Monroe smiled, lighting a cigar. On the wall, pinned with red string and tacks, were photos of Maggie. One card was left under her office door. "Your move, detective. In a city ruled by shadows, one wrong step can cost everything." Detective Maggie Callahan moved cautiously through her apartment, checking locks and windows for the third time that morning. The photo of her leaving the alley from the unknown sender still lay on the counter, its threat sharp in her mind. Officer Diaz arrived with coffee, his expression tight. "We can't ignore this, Maggie. Monroe's men aren't amateurs. They watch, they plan, and they strike without hesitation." Maggie sipped the coffee slowly, her eyes scanning the skyline outside. "We know he's watching. That much is clear. But why the cards? Why involve me directly?" Diaz shrugged. "Maybe he wants to play. Maybe he's testing you." And SHE shook her head. "Testing? No. He's sending a message. Something more personal. He knows I'm digging. He wants me scared, but he also wants me to follow the trail." NNTHE first clue had already appeared in the alley, the briefcase with Robert's ledgers. Now, the King of Hearts in the photo made it clear. Monroe's game had begun. Maggie's phone buzzed again, a new text. This time, just 3 words. "Alley, midnight, alone." NHER pulse spiked. She knew she shouldn't go. It was a trap, obvious and cruel. But the detective in her, the part that had hunted criminals for years, kicked in. She had to see, had to know what Monroe wanted. Diaz protested. Maggie, don't. NNSHE grabbed her coat. I have to do this. And I'm going alone. NNBY midnight. The fog was heavier than ever, curling around the streetlights and swallowing the alley in gray shadows. Maggie's boots splashed in puddles as she approached the place where Robert had died. Her breath fogged in the cold air, each exhale sharp and loud. And a figure emerged from the mist, tall, thin, fedora low over his face. He held a deck of cards in one hand, flicking them idly like a magician. Detective Callahan, the man said, voice smooth and deliberate. I was wondering how long it would take for you to join the game. Maggie's gun was up in a flash. Elias Monroe, she said. You're done hiding. Monroe chuckled, flipping a card. The Queen of Spades landed on the wet ground at her feet. Done? No, detective. I'm just beginning. You see, everyone has a role. You are the queen. And the game doesn't end until every piece falls. Maggie stepped forward, gun unwavering. Then I'll make sure you fall first. Monroe's smile widened. Bold words. But remember, in chess, the queen can be powerful, but even she is vulnerable. One wrong move, and everything collapses. The shadow moved behind Monroe. Another card flicked to the ground. This time, the jack of clubs. Maggie's heart sank. She realized Monroe had more men than she anticipated, and they were surrounding her. Before she could react, a single shot rang out. Monroe's men scattered, and Diaz appeared from the fog, gun blazing. Detective! Behind me! Monroe vanished into the shadows, leaving only the echo of his laughter and a deck of cards scattered in the puddles. Maggie bent down, picking up the Queen of Spades. Written faintly on its back. The next move, your bloodline chooses. Some family secrets are darker than any criminal's plot, and the past can reach across generations. Detective Maggie Callahan returned to her apartment with the Queen of Spades tucked into her coat pocket. Her hands shook, not from fear, but from the gravity of Monroe's words. Your bloodline chooses. NSHE stared at the family photos on her wall. Her father, long gone, had been a decorated cop, strict and principled. Her mother, gentle but wary, had always warned her about the shadows that could live in a city's corners. And her younger brother, David, the memory of his laughter made Maggie's chest ache. NNTHE realization hit her like a brick. Monroe wasn't just after her. He had researched her family, studied the patterns, the vulnerabilities. Her lineage wasn't a coincidence. It was a target. An Officer Diaz entered, carrying more intel from the investigation. Detective, we found something. Robert Holloway's ledgers. They reference an old family trust. Funds move through untraceable accounts, tied to a name Callahan. Maggie's heart skipped. Our family? Diaz nodded. Specifically, your grandfather. Looks like Monroe believes you. Or your bloodline. Hold the key to something he wants. NHER mind raced. Could it be a vendetta that stretched back decades? A debt owed to Monroe, or one of his predecessors? She remembered stories her father had told. A heist gone wrong. A partnership betrayed. A man who vanished without a trace. Could Monroe's obsession be tied to that old betrayal? Maggie's phone buzzed again. A video this time. It showed her apartment, her mother's old rocking chair, and a single message scribbled on a piece of cardboard. And blood reveals the truth. NNHER hands clenched the phone. Monroe wasn't just playing a game, he was trying to force her to confront family sins. To pay for something she had no memory of but that still defined her bloodline. Detective, you okay? Diaz asked, sensing the tension. NNSHE nodded slowly. I have to confront this, but not alone. Monroe's not just attacking me, he's attacking my family's legacy. I need to know what they did. I need to understand before we act. NNTHAT night. Maggie dug into old records, letters, and photographs stored in her attic. Dust coated the boxes, but the history inside burned with relevance. She found old correspondence between her grandfather and a man named Elias Monroe. An ancestor of the man now hunting her NNHER grandfather had been involved in a risky financial deal decades ago, one that went wrong. Monroe's ancestor had lost a fortune and sworn revenge, not against the grandfather, but against all who bore the Callahan name. Suddenly, the pieces clicked. Monroe's obsession wasn't random. It was generational. The Queen of Spades, the King of Hearts, each card, each message, a calculated step in a long brewing vendetta. Maggie whispered to herself, trembling but resolute. This is bigger than me, bigger than my career. It's about surviving my family's past. Across the city, Monroe shuffled a fresh deck of cards, selecting one carefully. A single queen. He smiled. Time for the bloodline to choose, and for the first piece to fall. When vengeance spans generations, survival demands a price, and the innocent may pay first. NNTHE streets of Baltimore were quieter than usual that night, fog curling low over the pavement like a restless spirit. Detective Maggie Callahan moved through the alleys with Officer Diaz, her senses sharp, every shadow a possible threat. They had traced Monroe's network to an abandoned warehouse near the docks, a place that smelled of salt, rust, and old money. "Nen, be careful," Diaz warned. "This isn't just Monroe, it's his men, and they won't hesitate." Maggie nodded, clutching her gun. "I know. We need to stop him before he gets anyone else." Inside the warehouse, the air was thick with the smell of oil and mildew. Crates and barrels cast long, jagged shadows in the dim light. At the center, tied to a chair, was a young man, Robert Holloway's assistant, Tom Sanders. His face was bruised, his eyes wide with terror. A single card lay on the floor in front of him, the ace of clubs. Monroe's voice echoed from the shadows. "Detective Callahan, how punctual. I've been expecting you." Maggie aimed her gun, keeping her eyes on the dark corners. "Monroe, release him." "This ends tonight." Monroe stepped forward, hands raised casually, a deck of cards in his hand. "Ends tonight?" "Oh no, detective. This is where it begins." Robert's death was only the introduction. Every move you make, every step you take, brings you closer to understanding the true cost of your family's past. Maggie's jaw tightened. "You're hurting innocent people for your vendetta. That stops now." Monroe smiled coldly. "Innocence is a relative term. Tom's just the first sacrifice." Before Maggie could react, a figure lunged from the shadows, hitting Diaz and knocking him aside. Monroe grabbed Tom's shoulder and shoved him forward, forcing him onto a marked X on the floor. And Maggie fired, the shots echoing, but Monroe's men emerged from the shadows, forming a barrier. He laughed as bullets ricocheted off metal crates. "The first move is made. The bloodline chooses, detective, and the price is paid." NNTOM cried out, struggling against his restraints. Maggie's heart raced. She knew she couldn't reach him without risking all of them. In a desperate move, she dove toward Tom, breaking one of the ropes binding him, but another of Monroe's men slammed a crate into her shoulder, sending her sprawling across the floor. Monroe stepped closer to Tom, pulling a knife with deliberate calm. "You see, detective, history is written in blood. Tonight, a new chapter begins." Maggie gritted her teeth, crawling back toward her weapon. Diaz, recovering, shouted and fired warning shots. Monroe's men hesitated, and in that split second, Maggie lunged again, tackling Tom free. They scrambled toward the exit, bullets ricocheting behind them, the fog outside swallowing their frantic escape. Monroe's laughter followed them into the night, echoing off brick walls like a curse. As they reached the street, Maggie looked back, and through the fog, she saw Monroe standing on the roof of the warehouse, tossing another card into the air, the Queen of Hearts. Her blood ran cold. The next sacrifice awaits. Some truths hide in plain sight, and uncovering them can be more dangerous than any gun. Detective Maggie Callahan and Officer Diaz stumbled into the foggy streets, Tom barely able to walk under Maggie's arm. The sounds of the city were muted, as if the night itself held its breath. Maggie's mind raced. Monroe wasn't just playing a game. He was manipulating events with precision, pulling them into his trap, exploiting family ties and past mistakes. Each card left behind wasn't just a message, it was a key to understanding his plan. And Diaz panted, glancing around nervously. "We need backup, Maggie. We can't take Monroe head-on like this. He's everywhere." Maggie shook her head, determination hardening her features. "We don't wait. We trace him. We find the connections he's hiding. If we understand his history, maybe we can predict his next move." They returned to headquarters, where Maggie spread the evidence across the table. Robert's ledgers, the playing cards, photographs of Monroe's men, and files from decades-old financial transactions involving her grandfather. The pattern was emerging, a network of debts, betrayals, and vendettas stretching back more than 30 years in. "Look here," Maggie said, pointing to a faded ledger entry. "This line shows a transfer from my grandfather to Monroe's ancestor. This isn't just about money. It's about bloodlines, power, and revenge." Diaz leaned in. So the game. It's personal. He's punishing your family, one generation at a time? Maggie nodded grimly. Exactly. And each card he leaves, each victim, is a warning, a puzzle. We need to solve it before the next one falls. Hours passed as Maggie mapped connections, traced transactions, and studied photographs. One name kept appearing in the shadows. Isabel Callahan, her aunt, vanished decades ago under mysterious circumstances. Her disappearance had never been solved. Maggie's stomach twisted. Could Monroe's vendetta involve her aunt? Was this the bloodline he referred to? Or a deeper secret? NNHER phone buzzed. A text message with no number. A single line and she knows too. Find her before I do. Maggie froze. The puzzle had shifted. Monroe wasn't just targeting her. He was moving closer to unearthing family secrets that had remained buried for generations. Diaz whispered, "Who is she? Your aunt?" Maggie clenched her fists. "I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out. And Monroe's going to regret ever starting this game." Across the city, Monroe leaned over a corkboard, a string connecting photographs, documents, and newspaper clippings. In the center was a new picture. Isabel Callahan, alive, sitting in a cafe, unaware she had just been spotted. Monroe traced a finger across her face and whispered, "The Queen awakens. Some truths, long buried, are more dangerous when they rise to the surface." And Detective Maggie Callahan drove through the fog-shrouded streets of Baltimore, her hands gripping the wheel with white-knuckled intensity. Tom Sanders, bruised but alert, sat beside her. Every turn of the city streets brought her closer to the answers she needed, and closer to Monroe's inevitable trap. "Do we even know where she is?" Diaz asked from the back seat. "Your aunt, Isabel. She could be anywhere." Maggie didn't answer immediately. Her mind raced over old family photographs, yellowed letters, and her grandfather's cryptic journal entries. Isabel had vanished years ago, leaving a void in the family that had never healed. Now Monroe's pursuit suggested she wasn't just a missing person. She was a linchpin in his plan. Finally, Maggie spoke. "There's a cafe on Pier 14. Isabel used to work there. If she's still in the city, that's the most likely place. But we have to be careful. Monroe knows I'd think this way." NNTHE fog thickened as they approached the pier. Maggie slowed the car to a crawl, scanning every window, every doorway. And then she saw her. A woman, sitting alone, sipping coffee, unaware she was being watched. Isabel Callahan, older than the photographs Maggie remembered, but unmistakably her aunt. Maggie exhaled slowly. "There she is. Keep it quiet. We can't alert Monroe that we've found her." They parked a block away. Maggie approached the cafe cautiously, keeping Tom and Diaz close behind. As she neared the door, a shadow moved in the alley behind the cafe. NNHER heart pounded. Monroe? One of his men? She couldn't be sure, but the feeling of being hunted prickled her skin. Inside, Isabel looked up as Maggie entered. Her eyes widened at the sight of her niece, alive and determined. "Maggie, how did you find me?" Before Maggie could answer, a gunshot rang out from the alley. Glass shattered in the cafe window. People screamed and ducked. Maggie's instincts kicked in, pushing Isabel behind the counter while she scanned the doorway. Monroe's men had arrived. Two figures stepped out of the fog, weapons drawn. Maggie whispered, "Stay down, I've got this." And a firefight erupted in the alley. Maggie returned fire, using tables and chairs for cover. Tom and Diaz flanked her, shouting as bullets ricocheted off walls. Isabel, frozen in terror, clutched Maggie's arm. Amid the chaos, Maggie noticed a card pinned to the cafe door. The Jack of Spades. She tore it down, her stomach twisting. Monroe's message was clear. The game had escalated. The Queen, Isabel, was now directly involved. With a well-aimed shot, Maggie forced the attackers to retreat into the fog. The street was silent again, save for the distant hum of city lights and sirens approaching. Isabel trembled, holding Maggie's hand. "Why? Why now?" Maggie's gaze hardened. "Because Monroe wants the bloodline to pay. But we're not pawns. Not anymore." Outside the cafe, Monroe watched from the shadows, a smile playing across his lips. He flipped a new card in his hand, the Ace of Hearts. "The game isn't over," he whispered. "It's only beginning." When the key to the game is revealed, the stakes become deadly personal. And Detective Maggie Callahan, Isabel, Tom, and Officer Diaz return to a safe house on the outskirts of Baltimore. The fog had lifted slightly, but the weight of Monroe's pursuit pressed heavily on them. The Jack of Spades had been a warning. Now the Ace of Hearts hinted at something more personal, more dangerous. Maggie laid the card on the table, staring at the ornate design. "This isn't just a threat," she muttered. "It's a declaration. He's aiming at the heart of the family. Literally." Isabel shivered. I never wanted any of this. I just disappeared to protect myself." Maggie's voice softened. "You did the right thing, Aunt Isabel. But Monroe isn't going to let the past stay buried. He thinks we hold something owed to him or his family, and now we have to finish what he started." And Diaz frowned. "And that is?" Maggie's eyes narrowed. "We uncover every secret, every connection, every debt, every betrayal that ties our bloodline to Monroe. Only then can we predict his next move." And hours passed as they dug through old records, ledgers, and photographs from Maggie's attic and Robert Holloway's recovered files. A pattern began to emerge. Decades-old debts, lost fortunes, and a series of betrayals that connected the Callahan family to Monroe's ancestors. "This explains everything," Maggie whispered, holding a photograph of her grandfather shaking hands with Monroe's father. "The missing funds, the broken deals. Monroe's vendetta isn't just against me. It's against the entire family. And he's using us as pawns in a game that started generations ago." Suddenly, Tom's phone buzzed. A message appeared on the screen, a live feed showing the safe house from a nearby rooftop. Maggie's heart raced. Monroe had tracked them again. NNSHE grabbed the phone. The screen flickered, and Monroe's figure appeared, backlit by the city lights. He held a single card, Ace of Hearts, and waved it slowly. "Detective Callahan," he said, voice calm but icy. "You've found the truth. Now comes the choice. Sacrifice or surrender? The Ace of Hearts reveals loyalty and betrayal. Which will you choose?" Maggie's hands clenched into fists. "We don't surrender. Not now. Not ever." Monroe's smile widened. "Then prepare for the final play. The bloodline must answer for the past and the present. One wrong move, and the queen falls." From the shadows, a new figure emerged, a young man, trained, ruthless, holding another card, the King of Diamonds. He stepped closer to the safe house window, whispering to the camera, "Time to finish the game, detective. Every move has consequences, and some games end in blood." Detective Maggie Callahan crouched behind the barricade of overturned tables in the safe house. The fog outside was thick, swallowing every distant siren and streetlight, leaving only the sound of her heartbeat and the tense silence of anticipation. Isabel huddled beside her, clutching her hands tightly. Tom and Diaz readied their weapons, eyes darting to every shadow, every flicker of movement outside the windows. The live feed on Tom's phone showed Monroe's figure disappearing into the night, only to be replaced by the young man with the King of Diamonds, a lethal enforcer trained to strike without hesitation. Maggie whispered, "This is it. The final move. We either end it tonight or the game ends us." Diaz looked uneasy. "Detective, he's fast, and he's smart. Are we really ready?" Maggie's jaw tightened. "We have to be. No more running. No more hiding." An NTHE young man outside slid silently along the rooftop, dropping onto the fire escape. Maggie counted every step, every shadow. When he reached the ground, he moved like a predator, precise, measured, almost ghostly. NNSHE gave the signal. Now, NNTOM and Diaz flanked Maggie as they burst from the safe house, weapons raised. A firefight erupted, echoes of gunfire ricocheting off brick walls. Isabel stayed close, moving only when Maggie nodded. NNTHE enforcer was quick, but Maggie's determination was fiercer. Every maneuver, every dodge, every shot was a testament to years of experience and a lifetime of resolve. Finally, in a tense face-off, Maggie cornered him in a narrow alley. Gun-trained, her eyes locked on his name, "Game over," she said, voice steady despite her racing heart. NNHE smirked, tilting his head. "You think it's over? Monroe always has the next move." Before he could strike, Isabel stepped forward, holding a card, the Queen of Hearts, left behind during Monroe's last assault. She raised it, trembling but resolute. "No more games. Not with our family. Not ever." NNTHE enforcer froze. Maggie used the moment to disarm him, knocking the gun from his hand and forcing him to his knees. Sirens wailed in the distance. Backup had arrived. And hours later, Monroe was finally captured, hiding in a warehouse on the docks. He sat calmly, still shuffling a deck of cards. Maggie stared down at him, her eyes burning with resolve. "You lose, Monroe," she said. Monroe smiled faintly. "Detective, perhaps. But remember, every victory has its cost, and some secrets remain in the shadows, waiting for the next game." Maggie didn't answer. She walked away, Isabel at her side, Tom and Diaz following. The cards scattered on the warehouse floor were soaked with rain and dust, but the message was clear. The game was over, at least for now. NNTHE Callahan family survived, battered but united. Maggie understood now that their bloodline carried both burdens and strength. The legacy of betrayal and vengeance had been confronted, and for the first time in decades the shadows receded. Baltimore's fog would return as it always did, but the Callahans had learned to stand in the light. NNTHE Queen of Hearts, resting safely in Maggie's drawer, was a reminder. Some games test family, courage, and resolve, but the strongest bloodline endures.